9 spine-chilling Walmart encounters, revealed secrets of sinister shadows at midnight. The fluorescent lights buzzed ominously overhead as Sarah stepped into the cold expanse of her small-town Walmart. Midnight. The hour when the familiar became the unknown. Tonight, though, it felt like a labyrinth of fear. Instead of the comfort she sought, she sensed an oppressive weight lurking in the shadows, a sinister presence watching her every move. She clutched her shopping list, heart racing faster than her feet could carry her down the aisles. The echo of her own footsteps couldn't drown out the soft whispers that floated like ghosts through the air. As she wandered deeper into the store, the aisles consumed her. Brightly colored packages and familiar brands morphed into creatures of dread. Every creak of shelving sent chills creeping down her spine, like icy fingers trailing along her skin. She paused, glancing over her shoulder. Was someone behind her? Just the night's paranoia, she assured herself. But as she turned back, she caught a glimpse of an oddly dressed figure, a man in tattered clothes, skin stark like a corpse's. His eyes glazed over, they drilled into Sarah's soul, and she quickly pushed past him, heart pounding. It was just a late-night shopper, nothing to fear, right? Then came the flickering lights buzzing and sputtering as shadows danced erratically along the aisles. Momentarily, the store plunged into darkness, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Panic clawed at her as the soft thrum of midnight silence twisted into something more menacing. She caught muffled voices from an aisle ahead, hushed words she couldn't decipher but felt like icy needles pricking at her ears. Shadows skittered in her periphery, and she forced herself to move deeper, to quell the rising tide of anxiety. But the feeling of being watched only intensified. She turned a corner and bumped directly into the security guard, his hulking shadow blocking her path. His demeanor shifted the way his eyes narrowed, they seemed to absorb her pain. It unnerved her to the core. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice low but somehow filled with unspoken malice. Sarah's throat went dry. Why did he look at her like that, as if he knew her wounds? Panic spread like wildfire in her chest. She'd heard whispers just before, conversations about mysterious happenings, a crackling exchange of unsettling secrets from the night shift. Something dark wove itself into her community, and it felt suffocatingly close now. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just then, she stumbled upon a group of employees huddled close, their voices hushed and furtive. Flickering overhead lights illuminated their anxious faces, panic rippled among them. She caught fragments of their conversation, words that chilled her to the bone, trading in grief, hidden network. Her heart raced, memories of her husband's mysterious death surfacing like a dark wave. Could there be a link? The community she once trusted now felt like a web woven of deceit. What were they really doing in the shadows of this brightly lit store? As she confronted the guard again, the atmosphere thickened with an unnatural heaviness. Every muscle in her body screamed to flee, but fear compelled her to fight. Then darkness descended like a shroud, the store engulfed in silence as the lights flickered violently. Whispers escalated into chaotic echoes, a symphony of fear chanting her name. Longing to understand instead of simply escaping, Sarah teetered on the edge of discovery. What truths lingered behind the neon-lit facade? She could feel the pull, every nerve alive with anticipation, every heartbeat a step closer to something terrible that awaited her in the shadows. The silence was crushing, thick like fog suffocating her breath. Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears as the lights blinked and then went out completely. The fluorescent buzz faded into an incomprehensible void, and a deep darkness enveloped her. She hesitated, feeling the ground beneath her shift, shadows swirling in the stillness like dark spirits, waiting. Sarah, the soft whisper echoed through the black void, wrapping around her like cold fingers. Her name. Who called her? Panic ignited a frantic burst of movement within her. She turned, fumbling blindly, reckless and desperate. Stop! A voice barked, harsh and commanding. It was the security guard, now standing mere inches away, his form distorted in the darkness. He reeked of sweat and something rancid, making her stomach churn. Had he been right there all along, watching? You shouldn't be here. Not now. Not now. She spat the words back, disbelief and dread flooding her system, fighting the overwhelming urge to run. What do you mean? What is going on? But the moment she opened her mouth, the whisper returned, growing louder, drowning out the reality around her. It became a cacophony, a blend of voices warped into chilling harmonies, longing and grief, anger and pleading. It struck her deep inside, clawing at memories she wished to forget. Who are you? What do you want? She shouted into the shadows, defiance sparking amid her terror. Silence fell, only her breath remained, shuddering in the oppressive gloom, and then, sharp against the quiet, came the snap of a flashlight turning on. An employee emerged, pale and wide-eyed, shaking like a leaf. You have to leave. It's not safe. He looked frantic, frantically pointing toward the grocery section. They're coming. Who? The dread curling in Sarah's gut twisted tighter. The guard stepped closer, shadows writhed around him, blurred lines of the man she had first perceived, a protector now twisted into something menacing. You don't want to know, he uttered, a smirk creeping across his lips that twisted her stomach. We need you. Suddenly, the lights blazed back to life, piercing the darkness. Instinctively, Sarah shielded her eyes, stumbling backward. The familiarity of the store rushed back like a tidal wave. But now, everything felt altered. The aisles seemed to stretch endlessly, each product staring back like haunted eyes. Before she could gather her thoughts, she noticed the employees had dispersed, melting into the shelves, their faces reflecting twisted terror, each a part of some dark secret they had hidden from her in plain sight. Wait! Where are you going? What is happening? She cried, her frantic tone drawing the attention of the guard again. He remained, a dark specter, blocking her path. The security cameras blinked overhead, each one watching, each one alive with menace. The comforting mundane of grocery shelves now felt like intimidating sentinels, guarding secrets more sinister than any late-night encounter. Heart racing, Sarah turned to the exit, but it felt further now, as if the store had expanded, swallowing her. Sarah, the haunting whispers returned, threading through the air, coiling tightly around her. Join us. Terror unfolded as she glimpsed a shadow near her, whispering too close, too familiar. It was the figure again, that man standing now in front of the checkout. No escape. Only shadows and whispers held hostage under the fluorescent glow, and it hit her, just as the whispers built into a deafening chorus. They were calling her to them, to a truth she was ready to confront. She paused, heartbeat pounding. Was there a choice anymore? Join us, the words echoed, the pull deepening. She took a step back, and like a sudden gust of wind, the lights flickered out again, darkness consuming her once more. What awaited her now in that suffocating void? What secrets lingered in the shadows, ready to swallow her whole? The darkness engulfed her completely, a thick, cloying blanket pressing tight against her skin. Each breath felt like a struggle, the emptiness whispering promises she dared not acknowledge. She stood frozen, the symphony of disembodied voices swirling around her, growing louder, demanding attention. Sarah, they murmured in unison, an otherworldly mantra that dripped with malice. They were close now. So very close. In an instant, the chill of a hand grasped her arm, icy and deliberate. A shock surged through her, pulling her back to the surface of her own panic. She gasped, heart racing, and jerked away, but the coldness lingered like a predator refusing to let go of its prey. Don't resist, a voice hissed from the darkness. It was neither familiar nor completely foreign. It felt wrong, as though the shadows infused it with fear itself. You have to let go. The command sank into her mind, merging with the soft whispers that now felt like a chorus of coaxing shadows. She shook her head, trying to escape the odd compulsion building within her, the urgency to give in to whatever they wanted. "Leave me alone!" She screamed into the void, but her words fell flat, swallowed whole by the night. Around her, the air thickened, and a palpable tension swelled as if the shadows were tightening their grip. She felt a sudden lurch, as if gravity had shifted, and she was being pulled downward. Beneath her feet, the ground rippled like water disturbed by a stone. It felt wrong, the usual solidness of the store had morphed into something alien. She stumbled, arms flailing, and fell to her knees, hands pressed against the cold floor. Then, just like that, the lights flashed back on, blinding in their intensity. The bright, sterile glow of the store illuminated everything, but the world felt distorted, fractures splintering her reality. She blinked against the brightness, eyes straining to adjust. "Don't look!" A voice cried, and somewhere in the chaos, she recognized the frantic pitch of the young employee. He stood frozen, terror etched in his features, his eyes darting across the room. "What do you mean, don't look?" Sarah shouted back, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "Why is this happening? Why are you all so scared?" He shook his head violently, as if to clear it. "It's not them, it's what's coming. It can see you." Driven by instinct, Sarah looked around, scanning the aisles. But what met her gaze was more unsettling than she could have imagined. The shelves were still and eerily silent, but in the reflections of the shiny floor tiles, she swore she saw figures moving just out of sight, blurred shadows darting in and out of her peripheral vision. "What is that?" She could barely contain her rising panic. Without warning, the lights flickered again, plunging her into that shrouded void. This time, it felt different, alive, vibrating with an energy that stoked the flames of her fear. "Join us!" The whispers grew frantic, clawing at her sanity, wrapping around her consciousness like a snake squeezing tighter. They wanted something. Needed something, and now she understood the gravity of her situation. It wasn't just a call, it was an insatiable demand. Then she saw it lurching out of the shadows like a nightmare made flesh. Eyes glowing with hunger, unblinking and still, it approached with deliberate slowness, hunger emanating from its form. What on earth was it? Sarah stumbled back again, the urgency of flight ignited within her. As she turned to flee, she spotted the guard. His mouth moved soundlessly, lips forming words she couldn't hear. His expression twisted into something savage and unnatural. The lights buzzed angrily before fluctuating again, and for a moment, she felt the relentless pull of whatever waited beyond. Fear surged as she ripped her gaze away from the sense of loss, thrusting herself toward the exit in a desperate bid for survival. But as she reached for the door, she hesitated. A shiver slithered down her spine as she recalled the smirking guard's words, "We need you." Was running the answer? Or was it too late to escape what the darkness had already claimed? The shadows stirred behind her, the whispers rising into a deafening roar as the figures burst forth. What awaited her now as she stood between shadows and the light? Would she become one of them, or could she break free? She didn't wait for the shadows to take her. Sarah lunged toward the door, heart pounding like a war drum in her chest, the wild rhythm of fear pushing her forward. Her fingers brushed the cold metal handle just as the lights flickered to darkness again, plunging her into a terrifying limbo. Panic clawed at her throat, choking off any screams that tried to escape. She felt the shadows swirl around her like a tangible storm, the darkness now alive, wrapping around her body, constricting tighter with each passing moment. The whispers, they were everywhere, filling her ears and settling deep in her mind. Join us!" With desperate resolve, she yanked the door open and stumbled into the parking lot. The night air hit her with a jolt, cool and sharp. But she barely had time to breathe. The parking lot was eerily silent, no customers, no cars, just a ghostly echo of what should be. Sarah turned, her eyes flicking toward the entrance she'd just escaped. The darkness surged behind her like a tidal wave, and she felt the undeniable pull of those whispers beckoning her back. She gasped, her breath hitching in her throat. Sarah, we're waiting. The distorted voice trailed from the store, echoing across the empty asphalt, sending a fresh wave of dread coursing through her veins. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath her feet. It felt like the store was alive, breathing, expanding, rearranging itself. A sickening churn in her stomach rose as the silhouettes of figures emerged at the entrance, pitch black against the faint glow of the store's remaining lights. They shifted and twisted, jagged as broken glass. "What are you?" she shouted, forcing the words out, her voice trembling yet edged with determination. But there was only silence in response, heavy and expectant. With every heartbeat, she could feel the weight of their stare, piercing through her. Sarah turned to run toward her car parked in the far corner, the dark expanse of the lot stretching before her like a vast ocean to cross. Each footfall felt weighty, the fear of what lurked behind pushing her along. As she sprinted, a faint glimmer caught her eye. It was her phone, just a few feet away, sitting abandoned on the ground. She barely hesitated, scooping it up, praying there would be enough battery left to make a call. But the screen flickered to life and the battery icon blinked ominously red. "Simon, Simon," she pleaded, thumbing the screen to dial 911, but the call wouldn't connect. Static filled the place where clarity should have been, echoing the frantic chaos threatening to swallow her. Suddenly, vibrations surged through her, a voice breaking through the static. "Sarah! You must come back." It was the young employee, his voice urgent and frenzied. "You're the key. You don't understand what's at stake. Stop. Get away from me." She screamed back, terror lancing through her like ice. Leaving the phone in her pocket, she dashed toward her car, nearing the sense of safety it offered. But as she reached the door, a gut-wrenching shriek erupted from the store, slicing the night air. An unnatural sound that drove nails of ice straight into her heart. The figures had moved closer, creeping out of the shadows with predatory grace. They swelled, seeping toward her like smoke, growing larger and more menacing. That in a final moment of desperation, she flung open her door, diving inside and slamming the door shut. It wouldn't be enough, she knew. The breathless anticipation of their pursuit tightened around her throat. She turned the ignition key, praying her car would roar to life. But it didn't. A slow, suffocating silence replaced the hopeful rumble. Trembling hands scrabbled at the steering wheel, shouting at the forsaken vehicle. "No. Not now." And as if in response, the shadows surged forward, blurring the edges of her panic. This was their game, and she was their prize. Would she be swallowed whole or find a way to escape? The night had only just begun, and whatever awaited her outside the steel confines of the car was far worse than she imagined. Would she muster the strength to confront it? Or would she be consumed by the fear creeping ever closer, inching toward her silently? The shadows gathered just outside her window, oppressive and thick. Sarah pressed her back against the seat, nails digging into the leather, refusing to breathe. She fought against the dizzying wave of panic sweeping over her. The stillness was suffocating. It felt like the universe held its breath, waiting for her to move. "Why won't you start?" she whispered to the dead engine, but all she received in return was the aching silence of the night. The shadows danced just out of her sight, writhing like snakes, teasing her with their presence. She could almost hear them giggling, caught in a cruel game of cat and mouse. Taking a shaky breath, Sarah tapped the dashboard, willing her phone to come back to life, but the screen remained blank, an empty promise. She glanced rearward, praying no figures would be looming behind her. The back seat was as dark as the night, and just the thought of something lurking there made her skin crawl. Then came a soft knock, a dull tap against her window. She flinched. A figure stood just beyond the glass, swathed in darkness. The breath stuck in her throat as the silhouette leaned closer. She squinted through the dim glow of the parking lot, heart racing. The face, pale and disfigured, emerged from the shadows, a twisted grin carved across its features. "Let us in, Sarah." The voice was a chorus of eerie whispers, echoing as if spoken by 1,000 twisted souls. "Join us." "No," she screamed, her voice ripped from her, raw and wild. The figure's smile widened, eyes gleaming with a predatory allure. Panic surged anew, and she scrambled for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The lock was stuck, as if it had been cursed. Desperate, she turned back to the windshield, searching for a way out. A flicker in the rearview mirror caught her eye. More figures emerged, circling her car like hungry wolves. Their movements were labored, jerky, and yet they seemed to glide effortlessly toward her, merging with the shadows. She shoved the gear into reverse, hoping against hope that the car would respond. It didn't. The engine remained a lifeless hunk of metal, as if mocking her, fueling her despair. She felt trapped, like a caged animal, with those soulless eyes watching her every move. "Sarah, it's your only chance," a voice whispered, rolling smoothly over the sounds of her heartbeat. Was it the young employee again, or another of those horrific shadows? The line between friend and foe blurred in her mind as the pressure built in her chest. "Get away!" she shouted, losing control. She pulled at her hair, the weight of dread crashing down on her. Outside, the figures shimmied closer, their skin shining slick and oily in the faint glow of the abandoned store facade. "You don't belong here," one of them hissed. "You never did. But we can make you ours. Forever." That promise curled around her heart like a cold hand. Her breath quickened, a frantic rhythm as she banged wildly on the steering wheel. "You will be free," they chanted in unison. "Join us." The last word echoed in her mind, ricocheting off the walls of sanity. She gripped the wheel tighter, the raw metallic taste of fear filling her mouth. Then a thought flickered in her mind, a dire plan. Her heart raced as she slowly turned her head to the passenger side, weighing her options. If she could muster the courage to flank their circular formation, maybe, just maybe, she could escape their grasp. Salvation lay beyond the barricade of living nightmares, freedom pulsed just out of reach. But, was she willing to face what waited beyond? As she unbuckled her seatbelt, tension loomed like a thundercloud. The figures sensed her movement, and their whispers swelled, pleading. "Join us, Sarah." In a heartbeat, she threw her door open and lunged into the night, heart pounding, breath hitching. What she didn't know was that the shadows were only beginning to play their game. The night air engulfed her like a freezing tide as Sarah stumbled away from her car, the metallic crash of the door closing behind her a distant echo. She had expected the shadows to swallow her whole, but the moment seemed suspended in time, a brief respite from their hunger. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but her legs felt like lead. Moonlight glinted off the pavement, and the world was still, too still, as if holding its breath. She cast a glance behind, heart hammering. The figures hovered just beyond the vehicle's frame, shadows twitching and writhing like a venomous nest of snakes waiting to strike. "Join us," they crooned, voices soft as silk but laced with malice. Clenching her fists, Sarah wheeled around and sprinted toward the dim glow of the convenience store, its flickering lottery sign casting haphazard light across the pavement. As she dashed forward, a sound pulled at her, a faint rustling behind her. It wasn't just the whispers, it was something more tangible. A shuffling, like dragging feet. Her pulse quickened as dread seized her. Those things could move, and they were moving now. She burst through the glass doors, slamming them shut just in time to hear the hiss of their breath against the glass. Inside, the store was deserted, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Shelves loomed like gnarled trees in a ghostly forest, and the hum of the fridge units added an eerie backdrop to her racing heart. She scanned the aisles, searching for a weapon. A thought came to her unbidden. Isn't this how horror movies began? A frightened girl alone in a dark place. Then she saw it. A heavy metal pipe, discarded under a set of shopping carts. Grabbing it, the weight was surprisingly comforting in her grip. She was ready to stand her ground. "Think, Sarah," she urged herself. "You need to figure out what they want." What did they want? The question echoed ominously in her mind, and panic fluttered anew in her chest. If only there was someone else around. The makings of a plan began to form. She needed to find an exit, some way to escape the grasp of those creatures. Suddenly, the store's lights flickered, dimming drastically before returning, but now there was a shadow behind the counter. A figure, cloaked in darkness, stood just out of reach. "Help!" she cried, bounding toward it. "Please, help me." But the figure remained motionless, like a statue unfazed by her pleas. The faint light illuminated a face full of hollow eyes and a mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. The air froze as the realization hit her, it was another shadow. Something is very wrong, her mind raced. They were everywhere. The front door rattled, a surge of frantic energy as the figures outside pressed against it. She was more trapped than before. Sarah turned back to the store, desperate to find another way out. She considered the rear exit, but it was shrouded in darkness, uncertainty echoing through her with each step. The whispers rose again, a cacophony of chilling voices. "Sarah, you can't escape us." She gripped the pipe tighter, scanning the surroundings, adrenaline coursing through her veins. There had to be a way out, a chance to break free, but then she paused, a thought clawing its way to the forefront of her mind. What if they weren't just shadows? What if they were the echoes of lost souls, trapped in this forsaken place? Could she really fight against a force like that? Just then, the figure behind the counter took a step closer, the smile widening impossibly, as if it could swallow her whole. "Join us, Sarah." Her breath quickened, terror wrapping its icy fingers around her throat. And somewhere in that sea of dark, Sarah felt the chilling sensation that she was being watched. Not just by the shadows outside, but something deeper, darker, waiting patiently in the corners of this store. What had she unleashed upon herself? The lights flickered violently, plunging her into darkness, and in that instant, she knew the game was far from over. The darkness enveloped her like an impenetrable cloak, each heartbeat a loud drum in the stillness. Sarah's breath echoed in her ears, the only sound in a bleak void that pulsed with unseen menace. She squeezed the pipe, drawing a thin layer of comfort from its weight. Hope felt distant, suffocated by the shadows that swirled just beyond the reach of feeble light. "Stop it!" she commanded, half pleading with the void around her. "You want me to join you? What does that even mean?" Her voice cracked in the oppressive silence. The figures outside seemed to pause, their whispers fading into a tense anticipation, as if her defiance had only fueled their thirst. Steps echoed from the back of the store, something shifted. "Come out!" she shouted, bracing herself for an imminent confrontation. She felt it then, a presence pushing against the air, cold and malevolent, drawing nearer. The figure behind the counter emerged, shifting from the dark like smoke unfurling. Its grin twisted unnaturally wide, stretching beyond human capacity. "You're scared," it whispered, voice like fingers sliding over her skin. "Good." She tightened her grip on the pipe, heart racing. "Get away from me." But it moved closer, eyes wide and shiny like black marbles, reflecting her fear back at her. "What if I told you joining us would be a relief? Freedom from fear." "No," she thought. The last flicker of hope told her to go. She bolted towards the rear exit, muscles screaming in protest. She didn't dare look back, but the laughter, oh, how the laughter chased her like a pack of wild dogs. The exit loomed, shrouded in impenetrable gloom. Fingers of dread curled around her throat as she reached for the doorknob. Just then, icy hands seized her arm, dragging her back. "No. You belong with us," the shadows murmured, laughter intertwining with venomous whispers. With a primal scream, Sarah swung the pipe wildly, the cold metal connection cracking against something solid. The figure stumbled back, caught off guard, the glee on its contorted face rippled into anger. "Foolish girl," it hissed, voice dripping with malice. "You think you can simply sever the ties?" Her breath came in panicked gasps, heart thrumming as she squeezed through the half-open doorway, landing on the asphalt outside. The cool night air hit her face like a slap. But it wasn't over yet. Those shapes were out there, lurking beyond the shadows, growing bolder now that their prey was free. "Run!" came the cries from the things behind her, laughter echoing in the dark. "You can't escape, you're already part of us." Dread surged again, pulling at her legs. She glanced back at the store, dimly lit now a beacon of where she refused to go. But outside, the night thrummed with a dark pulse of energy, an unseen heartbeat that made her hairs stand on end. With a sudden burst of resolve, Sarah ran. She dashed toward the nearest streetlight, its glow barely pushing back the darkness, but she had to get to the road. To safety. She felt eyes on her all around, shadows flickering, some of them even took shapes, shifting between reality and nightmare. Then, a new feeling swept through her, the realization that the shadows could be more than what they seemed. She had to accept that something terrible was hunting her, and perhaps they wanted more than just her. As she approached an intersection, she caught sight of her reflection in a nearby window, a ghost of herself, marked by fear, stained with the dark. Just then, she felt it. The ground beneath her feet shook imperceptibly, and the shadows shifted, coiling like serpents, ready to strike. What if their hunger wasn't just for her essence, but something deeper? Something more insidious? With every ounce of will she had left, she sprinted off into the night, desperation lacing her every move. But behind her, a figure emerged from the darkness, looming large against the dim light, eyes glinting with hunger. And then, as if in answer to a silent plea for help, a car's headlights swung around the corner. It honked vigorously, bursts of noise slicing through the silence like knives. Would it reach her in time? The shadows recoiled momentarily, but they were restless. Sarah, they beckoned, their voices low and chilling. You can't hide forever. You're ours now. In that moment, she could feel the absolute truth. She was entangled in something far beyond her, a dark web of fate that had just begun to tighten around her throat. And in the distance, the sound started again, a whisper slowly growing louder, echoing through the night, promising something she could only dread. The car screeched to a halt, headlights flooding the intersection in bright, blinding light. For a heartbeat, Sarah felt relief wash over her like cool water against parched skin. But then, the shadows hissed, their anguished whispers rising to a frenzied pitch, clawing at her mind as she stood frozen in the light glow. Get in! A voice shouted from inside the car, too urgent, too panicked. She didn't recognize the figure behind the wheel, just a silhouette twisted into a mask of fear. With no time to waste, she lunged for the passenger door, flinging it open and diving inside. Drive! She yelled, her voice a raw plea. The driver nodded, eyes wide, but the moment he shifted to pull away, it happened. The shadows leapt forward, coiling like fog around the wheels, claws grasping for their prey. She looked back, panic clawing at her gut as she saw them reaching, a dark swarm eager to reclaim what had slipped away. The tires screeched, dragging through the darkness, and the car jolted forward. They were moving, but Sarah felt the weight of the shadows pressing against the sides, trying to claw their way in. Don't stop. Don't you dare stop. She urged, feeling the silence beneath her words grow heavy. What the hell is going on, Sarah? The driver shot back, his voice tremulous. They just want you. Yes. She exclaimed, her heart pounding like a war drum. They want to take me back. The driver's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he accelerated, the car racing through the empty streets. The faint hum of the engine could barely drown out the tearing shadows behind them, but they weren't far behind. She could see them, slithering along the pavement, hungry and relentless. I can't deal with this. He shouted, panic breaking through his fear. I can't help you. A sharp breath caught in her throat. Could he really abandon her to that fate? She turned to him, desperation spilling over. Please. Just keep driving. We can find someone, anyone. They don't want anyone. They want you. He cried, eyes darting to the rearview mirror. The shadows surged closer, their laughter mingling with the sound of wind whipping around them, echoing in the car. Suddenly, the car lunged violently as something slammed against the back. God! He yelled, trying to steer away from the shadows that seemed to ripple, crashing against the metal frame like waves on the shore. Faster! Faster! Sarah urged, her pulse racing faster than the car itself. She could feel their presence creeping closer, tendrils of darkness stretching through the cracks of the windows, insinuating themselves into the very air they breathed, and then she remembered something: the store, the figures, their whispers. There's a place. A building where they can't follow. She gasped, frantically trying to take her mind off the shadows enveloping them. The old church. They can't take me there. The driver hesitated, eyes flicking between the road and her. You think that'll help? I don't know. But it's our best chance. Please. With his face twisted in fear, he turned sharply, tires skidding as they veered towards the church. Each turn felt like a descent into hell, shadows morphing into figures at the edges of his vision, reaching for Sarah. As they neared the church, the skyline shifted. A silhouetted tower loomed up ahead, bathed in starlight, but surrounding it was a halo of darkness, as if the shadows had made it their home. Faster! Sarah screeched, gripping the handle. Their chance was slipping away. Then, she saw it: an old bell tolling, swinging in the night like a warning. But even as they approached, she felt doubt creep in. Would it even protect her? Could anything save her from this? And just as the car approached the entrance, shadows erupted from every corner. They swarmed toward her now, desperate and furious, and she felt their cold fingers on her skin, pulling at her. Don't let them take me! She screamed, clawing at her seat, the horrifying truth dawning on her that she might never be free. The driver slammed the brakes, throwing them forward, the sound of her heart echoing in her ears. As they ground to a halt, she realized the darkness was a hunger that had no end, and it was coming for her. Would she escape? Or was this night just the beginning of her nightmare? And then came the final chilling whisper, piercing through the chaos: you can never leave, you can never leave. The church loomed, a sanctuary or a trap. In the balance of terror, the question hung heavy in the air: was this safe haven really their salvation, or merely a final stop on a road paved with shadows? The car jolted as its tires ground to a halt, the headlights flickering like dying stars before succumbing to the encroaching darkness. Sarah's heart raced, pumping urgency through her veins. The driver's face was a mask of terror, shadows pooling around them like ink spilling on paper. Get out! Sarah shouted, her voice almost drowned by the shadows' shrieks, a cacophony of tortured voices ready to reclaim her. Panic surged through her and she instinctively reached for the door. The driver hesitated, his gaze glued to the rearview mirror, dread etched across his features. Are you insane? He cried, his hands trembling on the wheel. They'll get you. I don't care. She screamed, flinging the passenger door open. Night air rushed in, thick and suffocating, tainted with the scent of decay. The moment she stepped out, the shadows clawed toward her like a swarm of insects, eager to drag her back into their infinite void. Sarah! The driver yelled from inside the car, but she didn't look back. She bolted toward the church, desperation fueling her every stride. Each step felt like running through molasses, the darkness trying to pull her back, wrapping around her legs like chains. The church stood there, bathed in moonlight, a beacon of hope. But the whispers grew louder, a disturbing serenade promising torment. Come to us, they hummed, enticing her to give in. She pushed against the weight of their voices, breathless and terrified. She reached the church door, its heavy wooden frame looming before her. Fumbling, she grasped the handle and yanked, but it wouldn't budge. The shadows were closing in, swirling, hungry. She could hear them sigh, needy, insatiable. Open up! She cried, forcing her body against the door as the air hummed with malignant energy. Finally, it gave way, creaking open with an agonizing moan. She tumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind her. The sound resonated like a death knell, drowning out the cacophony outside. Inside, the church was shrouded in near-complete darkness. The musty scent of old wood and stale incense permeated the air. Flickers of moonlight spilled through stained glass windows, casting eerie shapes on the stone floor. She barely had time to breathe, her heart racing louder than the shadows outside, still yearning to enter. Where are you? She gasped, peering into the dimness. The silence hung heavily, broken only by the hollow echo of her own voice. The church felt alive, the walls damp with secrets, as if it was watching her. She moved deeper inside. As she passed a weathered wooden pew, the shadows seemed to retreat slightly, as if unsure of how to approach her in this sacred space. But every so often, she felt a cold breath on her neck, a teasing whisper reminding her that she was still tethered to the darkness outside. "Sarah," a voice broke the silence. Low, soft, but unmistakably familiar. Her stomach twisted. "Who is there?" A figure emerged from the shadows. The flickering light revealed a face she had only seen in her nightmares, an apparition of herself, eyes wide and hollow, lips curled into a twisted smile. "They've been waiting for you," it hissed. Sarah stumbled back, fear wrapping around her like a noose. "No, this can't be real." But the figure stepped forward, shadows trailing behind it like a tattered cloak. "You have to make a choice," it whispered, tilting its head in a way that sent chills racing down her spine. Questions raced through her mind. What choice? What did it mean? The air vibrated with tension, pressing in from all sides. She felt the shadows outside latched onto the church, showing their discontent. "Don't listen to it." Another voice called from the dark recesses of the church, startling her. It was the driver, stumbling into the moonlight. His face was pale, eyes wild with fear. "Sarah, you can't trust it." "No." The figure cried, its voice rising, blending with the chorus of shadows outside. "Only one can stay." The clash of voices swelled, reverberating off the stone walls as Sarah's mind raced. One could stay. What did that mean for her? Panic swirled, and she felt the walls closing in, every shadow tightening around her. Just as she thought it couldn't get worse, the church began to tremble, the ground vibrating underfoot. She clutched at the pew for support, the choice pulling at her like a rope, swinging between freedom and the darkness. Would she choose to stay anchored to the light, risking the shadow's wrath? Or face the truth that she had been chasing a mirage, and behind it all, the shadows still whispered, "You can never leave." What choice would Sarah make? The terror of the unknown loomed over her as the truth hung heavy in the air. Time was running out. Sarah's chest tightened as the shadows outside whispered her name, a haunting refrain mixed with the mounting chaos inside the church. Each word vibrated with a melancholic urgency, each syllable an echo of something far deeper than mere threat. She stood at the brink of despair, trapped between shadows and a reflection of her own fear. "Just a choice," the doppelganger hissed, eyes gleaming with something dark and incomprehensible. "But only one can stay." "What does that even mean?" Sarah shouted, her voice trembling. She could feel the ground tremble beneath her, the shadows outside clawing at the heavy church doors as they pulsed with an eerie life of their own, demanding entry. "Choose," the figure repeated, a twisted smile forming as its words seemed to wrap around Sarah's thoughts. "Join us." A shiver crawled up her spine as the whisper grew louder, drawing closer. "Don't listen," the driver urged from a distance, his voice cracking. "It's a trick. This place, it wants to trap you." Sarah's instincts raged within, the fear of losing herself wrestling with a desperate need to remember what she was fighting for. She spun toward the doorway. Outside, the shadows huddled, figures shifting and writhing, hungry for her return. The thought of giving in felt like a dark pit waiting to swallow her whole. "Why can't we both escape?" she pleaded. "I don't want to leave anyone behind." The apparition laughed, a sound that chilled her bones. "It's too late for that, Sarah. One must remain. One must belong." The church trembled again, a fierce shudder that rippled through her. She felt it in her bones. The shadows were not just a danger, they were a hunger, an insatiable need to consume and claim. "Remember," the driver's voice came again, loud and clear. "Your husband's death was not the end. You survived, fought through that pain. Don't you see? You have the strength to keep fighting." His words stirred the embers within her, flickers of resilience igniting against the dark tides of despair. "I am not yours," she shouted, voice breaking but fierce. The figure faltered, momentarily thrown off by her defiance. "You will regret this," it hissed, shadows melting behind it, swirling into more threatening shapes that flickered and danced on the edges of reality. "Make a choice," they screeched, growing frenzied in their demands. "Join us or suffer with that." The door rattled violently, the air thick with menace. It was clear, the shadows wanted her to falter, desired her to collapse under the pressure. But amidst the fear, that small spark of hope began to glow brighter. "I choose," Sarah said, her voice steady, holding her chin high. "I choose to fight for the light." The doppelganger screamed, mouth open wide as the air thickened with rage. "You cannot escape your destiny." But Sarah turned away, bolting toward the driver. She reached for him, grounding herself in his presence. "We need to find a way to break this curse. Together." And in that moment, she saw them, the echoes of imprisonment, the shadows that longed to take control but now flickered with hesitation. "Join us," they whispered, their voices faltering as the light of hope swelled within her. "Not today." Sarah yelled, the metal pipe gripped tightly, and she swung it fiercely against the wooden pew. The impact reverberated through the air, the sound sharp, raw, as light burst forth, filling the church with brilliance, forcing the shadows to retreat. The church shuddered, struggling against the onslaught but empowering her heart. "We'll break free," she cried, locking eyes with the driver. "Together. Now." They rushed toward the church doors as blinding light poured in from behind them, shoving the darkness aside. With every step, Sarah felt the pressure lift, shadows shrieking in anger, retreating into corners, retreating into the oblivion from which they came. Bursting through the entryway, they found themselves on the steps of the church, sunlight breaking across the horizon. The dawn felt like a warm embrace after a night of torment, and Sarah couldn't help but draw in the fresh air, a delicious taste of freedom. "They're gone," she whispered, breathless and disbelieving. The shadows, once ominous and demanding, had dissolved into the light of day, leaving only echoes of what had been. The fear that bound her floated away, replaced by a powerful surge of relief. The driver turned to her, relief etched on his face. "You did it, Sarah. You fought." Collectively, they stood in awe as dawn broke across the sky. Together, they had defied the shadows. Suddenly, Sarah felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted, and it wasn't just fear, but the grief that had been suffocating her. "I can keep moving forward," she whispered, finally embracing the truth. And as the sun rose higher, bathing the world in golden warmth, Sarah turned her gaze to the path ahead. The horrors would not define her, she would carry her story and her strength with her. Together, they walked on, ready to take on each day anew, armed not just with metal or fear, but with the light that shone from within. Thank you for joining us on this dark journey. If you loved this story, then you need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive tales we'll unveil. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm and keep us thriving. Flood the comments below with your thoughts and theories about Sarah's journey, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who deserve to experience this conclusion with you. Your support makes all the difference.